Ah, I have to admit that uh, getting ready for the talk last week when I got the reminder, I thought, what am I going to talk about? That, I've talked so many talks about difficult things because at that time I was thinking, oh, I know for me, I'm bracing for January 20th for the inauguration, and I have a lot of fear and anxiety and anger and frustration and all sorts of complex and vacillating emotions about it. And also, it's the Gregorian calendar New Year, so I'm studying this sutta called the Bhadakarata Sutta from the Middle Length Discourse, and it's called An Auspicious Day. There's a translation from one of my teachers, the teachers I'm studying with, Gail Fronsdahl. And if you know it from the Bhikkhu Bodhi and Anamoli version, they do say it's an excellent night. But Gil, who's also a scholar, says that he calls it an auspicious day in part because the Pali word means both the sense of, like, when we say day, we could mean daytime or we could mean day as the whole day, right? Cycle of the day. So I like the day because it gives a sense of the fullness of it. So it goes like this, and I did have some thought about it because it is about seizing the moment, so to speak, and that's its main theme, and it gets to it in kind of the direct way, in a kind of a way. So maybe a little content warning, given the situation going on in LA or in other parts of the world. An auspicious day. The Buddha said, "Don't chase the past or long for the future. What's gone into the past, that has ended, and the future is not yet reached. Wherever something has arisen, right there, see clearly. This, the wise practice, unwavering and unshakable. Ardently do what should be done today. Who knows, death may come tomorrow. There is no bargaining with mortality and his great army. Whoever dwells thus, ardent, active day and night, is, says the peaceful sage, which means the Buddha, one who has an auspicious day." Now, I chose this in part because it's the new year, and also because I thought with a lot of the fear and anxiety and other complex feelings I have about what's coming up in the politics and its impacts in the United States, and again, I sense it in the world too, that I really want us to, while there's all that fear, I think what's so useful as people who are healing, people who are working to work against oppression, to not be beaten, to not be overcome by despair, is to kind of frame it in a way that works for us. To me, so much of practice is about reframing how we perceive the world. And in fact, the Buddha, teaches that our practice is to practice so that we know wholesomeness. It isn't a passive practice, Buddhism. Their practices, like part of the quality of mindfulness, is to see things as they are, right? And then there's different ways of talking about that, and to have, you know, a non-judgmental, receptive quality. But that doesn't mean that when things need to be addressed, you know, we're just passive about it. So, and very much our practice is sure to have that sense so that we can see things clearly when we're agitated in particular. And our practice is towards the wholesome, towards what is wholesome. How do we regulate ourselves so that we can connect to wholesomeness? And so that's why for me, this is very much about how do we frame things for ourselves that are positive, wholesome, not because we're Pollyanna, but so that we don't fall into despair. This kind of balancing out, harmonizing in the midst of turbulent conditions. And then with the fires, and again, somebody in my Sangha is, you know, has lost their housing. So this is very much so. And I will say that I started to tweak some things, and then I thought, you know what I really want to talk about is, I know as a response is from a trauma response, that's really important to know what is called now time, right? And so when I thought about it, I thought, oh, what do we want to really pay attention to and frame for ourselves? You know, that's another way of thinking about reframing. Frame for myself now what is meaningful, what is useful, what is wholesome. And so that's, to me, both in terms of time and of space. So that's what I want to talk about. We well know that, and this points towards it, that the past is a past. We know that. And that so much of our practice is actually how do we be present? And to be perfectly honest, we are never not present. I just, you know, you and me, we exist right now. We exist right now. We really do. Our thinking, our feelings are present. The impact that we feel is from our perception about the past, which doesn't make them wrong, mind you. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. And why practice is so helpful to work with trauma is that it reminds us, it gives us tools for how to be present, how to stay present with the impact from the past. The presentness is some of the feelings that, and emotions and body sensations and thoughts come from the past for sure. That's what, one way you can think about karma is, right? It's the energetic level that just keeps on moving, right? And so it's not denying, mind you, that's not what I'm saying at all. It's just more, it's really useful to know now time. This is a very visceral thing. So for those of us working with trauma, we need to remember now time, right? By that, I mean when we are impacted by the past and let's say safety, I remember the Tet offensive. And so even though it's not a direct, correlation, I talked to my student who was experiencing the fire, and I know for me, I remember the flash of the bombs and the lighting in the dark and the fear of death. So this is, it triggers, it activates my own thing. And so I know I need to work on, okay, yes, and right now, even though my heart is beating fast or there's a sense of fear, of safety, how do I practice being in the present? Not to deny that, but just remind myself and to really anchor myself that yes, that's a valid sense, and right now I am safe. Right? I am safe, both so that I can be here for myself and I can be here to interact with the person who has had a more immediate impact about safety. Does that make sense? And so our practice does that, right? Really, when you notice what's going on in the body, everything I say everything's present, but the one thing for sure is the body is always present. Your body's nowhere else, right? And so when we pay attention to our body, and again, the main focus in Buddhism is the posture in terms of first foundation mindfulness, the posture and the breath, and also certainly about our thinking and our emotions, but sensations, when we focus on sensations, it's always present. In the meditation, I talked about how we could do that looking around too. And that's more about space, which I'll get back to that. I'll get to that when we get to that. But that helps, gives us a sense also of really visceral, right? I use the sight, use the sound. I didn't say anything about smell, but you could have smell. That's very present. I don't know, you could taste your dinner left over in your mouth, or, what if you want. So that very visceral. So that really helps us. And this is why there's so much focus actually on sensation. The other thing is when we notice sensation, unless it's specific to a body issue, such as, say, asthma or something like that. But for many of us, emotions and mental stuff is much what I call enmesh. So when we pay more attention to the sensation, that can give us some sense of space, okay? Some sense of separation, so that we can be clear what our sensation, what our emotion, and what our thoughts. And then we can focus on which of those helps us to stay centered. For instance, if I'm anxious, let's say, I like to use the example where, I'm a priest, and in the beginning, when I used to offer incense, my hand would shake. I love all the, forms and stuff of a Zen priest, but when everyone's watching me, my hand would shake, right? Now, one time I realized that I love it. And so on one level, I'm very excited. I'm very excited by what I'm doing, but then I'm also anxious because when my thought is, everyone is watching me. And so if I pay attention to the thought, what happens? I get more nervous. But if I pay attention to the emotion of excitement, right? And to then that I'm doing that, and the hand movement, when I can focus on that, what actually happens is I actually take a breath, and that helps me to steady. And it actually brings a smile to my face because I enjoy it. And so there's similar kind of emotions and similar kind of feelings, but this is why concentration is so important, so that you can focus on the part you want to focus on. If I stay focused on the thought, everyone's watching me, I'm just going to get more nervous. If I can focus on the enjoyment, the sensation of the incense going into the ash, and how lovely that feels, right? And the scent of the incense. Now we use flower petals, but because scent stuff, which I am sensitive to. So, do you see what I'm saying? So that's so important for how we can be present, and that's important. Now, the other thing, though, is that how can we, one way, and, I'm not going to be able in however minutes to give you a whole range of things, but one way I think about how can we think about the past in a way that supports us to stay grounded and focus on what's supportive and grounding and wholesome, is that the other thing I think about when I think a lot about when I am in despair, when I'm having a difficult time, that the trauma of my life is a generational kind of trauma. It's not just mine. And many people I know. The other thing, though, is to remember is that there's ancestral or generational resilience. We and our people know this. It didn't just happen now. It's, it's important, my experience for sure. And I'm from people who know this shit and have not just survived the shit, but has thrived. And I've, through my life of past, am at a point in which a lot of time I can say I'm thriving now. And in fact, to me, that's healing, when it's not just surviving, that I know that I'm thriving. So when I review the past, can I remember that it's not just of difficulties and challenges and suffering, but it's actually healing, building, thriving, wholesomeness. I want to say fucking wholesomeness, but for those of you who know me, I sort of, okay? That's for emphasis. All right. So we want to remember that. And then the other thing, after the election, my girlfriend was showing me some Instagram that was uplifting, as she likes to do at the end of the day. And I apologize, and I'm not on Instagram and stuff very much, so I apologize. I don't know who it was, but Indigenous person from Australia was talking about how, and I can say it directly since I'm in this group, my memory of what they were saying was that, now, there's that hope, and their thing was they leaned back and they just shook their hand, that white people hope of like fluffy wishes, I hope people are okay in LA. I hope it's okay. I really wish things would be okay, right? And then they said, but our sense of hope is that you lean in and you're committed to making what your wishes and what you want to happen. So this is the kind of hope that we're talking about. To me, it's when she used the word commitment, I thought, that's like vow. As a priest, as a person, and Sutta Zen, we vow a lot, right? So that vow, but vow is a kind of commitment. In a way, a vow is a public commitment. That's why when we take the precepts to get, the precepts and all the thing, it's always public. Anyone can arrive. And it's because, one, I'm publicly saying to you, I can be a safe person. We take the precepts to be safe to ourselves and to everyone. And at the same time, we're not just accountable then to the community, the Sangha, but we're asking the Sangha and the community to support us. That's why the publicness is not just outwardly, but the publicness is asking for support. And so this is the kind of future time that we're talking about. To me, commitment, vow is to the future. I see what has been harmful and hurtful in the past. In the present, I see its impact on me, and my commitment is to compost that, to transform that, to vow to make it better for the future. That's my kind of hope. That's my kind of commitment. That's my kind of vow about the future. Now, what about space? So in the meditation, I did that home thing, and I think that, it's a useful tool from therapy about, if you've been to therapy, you're struggling, your therapist is like, name 3 things in the room. And I was a therapist, so that's where it comes from. And you have color. And then I thought, what if I can do that internally, right? What if I can bring that sense of, what is the internal sense of my experience? What's the home inside? Home isn't just outside. And for many of us who have moved a lot, immigrants in particular, or refugees, in some ways, we practice to find a sense of home that is not based on condition. Not that it's not useful, the outside condition, but and so much of our practice is to find that centeredness that no fucking person, situation, system can take away from us. right? And not only that, not only as an idea, but act as a visceral feeling, as a really visceral, confident feeling. And this is why it's so important. Also, it takes us back to sensations, because sensations, for me at least, right, are very known, easily known. Cold, like right now, my hands are cold. If, it's very here, so I can depend on that, right? So a lot of practice is just noting sensation in a way that's very clear as it is. Not my opinion of it necessarily, and by the way, having opinion is fine, and this is where, again, concentration is so useful. Okay, I have an opinion, because when I first put my hands to my cheeks, I thought, oh, it is cold, and just that tone of my voice to myself was like, I don't like it, But then when I just stay with the coolness, it's just coolness. And when I just stay with it, it actually feels good because I'm a little flush right now. My heater's over there and it was cold when I first started, but now I'm starting to get hot in this room, right? So at first, my habitual sense is like, oh, I don't like it, it's cold. But when I just stay with it, oh, actually it feels really good, right? So also, by the way, we practice to stay with things for a while, which is about time, because it gives us a sense to really notice the changing condition. First, the cold didn't feel good, but with time, when I stay with it, it felt good. I did not feel good, and now it feels good. See, if I had just said, oh, it doesn't feel good, and I just take my hand away, then I wouldn't have experienced the part that felt good. So this is also why our practice needs to be in time. And that's also commitment, Yeah, it's okay to say, I commit for this moment, but the kind of commitment that we really want is long-term commitment, isn't it? That's how we learn to trust ourselves or others. Are they there for us? Are they committed to this, right? So that's the kind of commitment that's in time. And in space too, how do we find that sense of really that I can inhabit any fucking condition, any space, right? That's part of our practice. That's where we get the grounding. The other thing is there's that sense of space that comes from classically called renunciation. By the way, the Buddha, said that when he observed his thinking, there are two sets of thinking. Unwholesome, right? Which is greed, hate, and delusion. And then the wholesome, which is the opposite from greed. Then it is renunciation. From hate, then it's metta. And from delusion or ignorance, it's karuna, right? Or wisdom, sometimes you could say, okay? So that comes out of the wisdom of karuna, okay? So for me, a sense that we can talk about space is that when we can renounce the learned sense of what thoughts, what beliefs we should uphold. For instance, that white people's comfort is more important than mine. This is why I'm nice all the time. They say something to me and I'm like, oh, it's okay. And I forget that, no, I do not need to take care of your emotions. Just, So we need to unlearn that, right? And when we can renounce certain beliefs that we've internalized from systems of oppression, that gives us a kind of space, doesn't it? Tenzin Pomo, who, was in a cave for 12 years, wrote a book, it was a while back. She said, oh, everyone thinks that renouncing things is hard. but renouncing your thoughts, your thinking, and really it means the beliefs in your thinking, right, is the hardest thing. And this is why so much of our practice is to realize that a thought is just a thought. For instance, someone very close to me the other day just said, oh no, so they're having a hard time getting their gig worker and getting work, right? And so they've been struggling for a while. And he said, and they produce things and are creative. And they said, I just thought, what if I have peaked? What if I have peaked already? Maybe that's why I'm not getting work. And I was like, that is not a useful thought. That is not a useful thought. You're very creative. Right now you're struggling, but that thought is not useful right now. Is there a way that you can, that's doubt, which is one of the hindrances, right? So can you, as I like to say with the hindrances, can you doubt the doubt? Wait a minute. Is that doubt useful? Is that doubt wholesome right now? So I doubt the doubt, or then I dumb the doubt. By that I just turn down the volume, right? It's still there. We don't need to push it away. There's no resisting, but we learn that our thoughts they do not have to be belief. They're just like in Zen, I like to say, like a cloud in an endless sky, just passing, right? And then the third I like to say is we discuss the doubt, which my friend was doing with me, right? If you discuss it with a good friend, they could say, nah, you haven't peaked. It's okay, right? I would say I've taught that for a bit, and I had a student once who said, oh, I'd like to disregard the doubt. So now we have a the doubt too, just the doubt, right? Just like, that's okay. You have your space, but now, not coming in here, right? Right? So that's a kind of space and it actually is really so restful when we don't have to follow every thought that we think we have. In the West we think, I think, therefore I am, but really a thought is just a thought in Buddhism. Or another way to think of it is all thoughts are just thought, and I have agency to take the one that supports my life, that supports me to thrive. I don't need the thoughts that grind me down, bring me into despair, right? They're not truths in my life, and there's another way to think about it. Now, again, that time and space work together. And then the last, and I'm watching time, is that, of course, space, literal space, again, the home thing in the meditation, but also Sangha space, right? Real space, even virtual space. This is a real thing, right? So finding, connecting, showing up, committing to showing up takes time, takes space. Or creating our own, just like the stuff with the LA fire. And then, Crystal, I'm using your name. I hope it's okay. Crystal, reach out to the teachers and email and say, hey, let's do something about this. And I was like, okay, I will do it, right? So this is Sangha reaching out to make the space. So we're creating the space tomorrow to support each other. So we can do this. All right, what else do I want to say? I think that's enough for now. So I'll just read this again. Ardently do what should be done today. It does mean time in the present, but also I think that the should here is a good should. Like, what is wholesome? What is useful? What is thriving? Ardently do what should be done today. Who knows, death may come tomorrow. It just means time can be short, right? And situations like the LA fire just really points out to that. And many of us know things can change in a moment. So we need to activate our commitment now. There's no bargaining with mortality and his great army. There are certain forces such as illness and death, conditions of life that comes. Whoever dwells thus, colon, ardent. Ardent means committed with energy. Active day and night. Again, long-term commitment, not one-time commitment. Not that those are okay, not okay. Just the long-term commitments where we can build trust and actually where we can build confidence. My latest definition, my own definition of faith is strengthened confidence. Strengthened confidence, right? Ardent, active day and night is, says the peaceful sage, one who has an auspicious day. So is there a way that we can, in the midst of sorrow, difficulties, activating, triggering, scary, fearful, can realize that we have agency, that when we really engage and know that we have agency both in time and space, both individually and collectively, how can it then be actually an auspicious day? A day that's alive and full. That's what an auspicious day is. And where we feel connected, cared for, and present. Thank you for listening.